Not hugely, because we haven't been doing that ourselves. But if you talk to Paula,
Right, okay.
she'll. Sorry, this is a Leicester discussion now.
Babington School in Leicester.
She'll be able to put you in the right direction. Just very brief, because I realise we've got virtually no time. So what I'm saying is, lesson study doesn't give you a clear landscape. It begins to blow some of the mist away, but it's not a panacea. You know, I'm not trying to advocate that every single ill within education can be solved through this technique. It's one of a number of different approaches I think we can use. But our belief and all of the evidence that we've collected thus far seem to suggest that what it does is it blows some more of that mist away of what's happening in classrooms and allows people to engage and understand at a deeper level. Just to sort of very quickly finish off with, because I'm conscious of time, there's two things I think that we would argue major issues that have been thrown up by this. One is from transcripts, from discussions, etc. People are very good at discussing teaching. They're not necessarily so good at discussing learning. And I think that's because we don't have a particularly brilliant understanding of learning. I think my argument would be that the national strategies were partly to blame on that, because all of the discussion of the national strategies was how you teach. There was very little about learning. We use this model by somebody called Knutti Leris, who's a Danish psychologist. I'm not saying again go out and buy. I'm not his sort of bookseller or whatever. You can use. There are lots of different ways of understanding learning. We just find this useful. He argues there's three dimensions of learning: the cognitive, what's going on inside people's heads that you can't see; the emotional. He has this wonderful phrase: if you're not willing to give mental energy to learning, you won't learn. So it's about the idea of motivation, etc. And then the social. And he would argue, I think, that even things like reading books is a social process. You're reading somebody else's ideas. It's just that it's asymmetrical. And he argues that you need all three dimensions working well to actually get learning. But that's just a very brief sort of introduction. And the other thing that we've started working on, just to finish off with, is what we're calling pedagogic literacy. We're just finishing off a paper at the moment where actually we say that we think that teacher standards are way too restrictive. That actually it's a really restricted view of what it means to be a teacher and what pedagogy is. And this sort of fixation that various agencies have that sort of by about the third year of your teaching career you should be outstanding is just cobblers. That actually being, I think outstanding has lost a lot of any kind of meaning anyway, if I'm honest. But actually, what we should be looking for is the idea that people can develop their pedagogic literacy and understanding over a whole career. You know, it's not about getting up to speed in for the first 5 years and then, yeah, we made it, great. It's about a slow accrual. And therefore, we talk about it having a whole series of facets from our own values, attitudes and philosophies as teachers. I think that's why, if I'm honest, that's why I think there's so much of a problem with things like depression and anxiety at the moment in education, is because actually the gap between government policy and diktat and teachers' values and philosophies have slowly got wider and wider and wider. And as it gets wider and wider and wider, that's where you start getting depression and mental health issues, because people are doing things they don't believe in. Personal growth, collaborative growth again. But we argue that you need to do things, you need to be able to understand school policies. I spent a lot of my time as a head of department working out which policies I could get around if I thought they were a load of rubbish, and how I could subvert the system without losing my job. But also even at societal the societal context, do we understand the wider set of issues that we are working within? And all of those together actually then come together in the way that we act within classrooms. And it's about developing our pedagogical literacy, and it's a slow, sustained, professional job that we should be doing ourselves and with others, making our own decisions and therefore developing our professional capital. Okay, so I hope that's helpful.